Have you ever felt nostalgia for a time you never lived in, homes you didn't grow up in, memories that aren't yours, a past that you never experienced, but it still feels familiar? What you're experiencing is a feeling called anemoia, the feeling of nostalgia for a time you never experienced. Now, if you haven't heard of this word, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. Anemoia is a new word, or, well, it's better to say it's a newer word in the grand scheme of things. Originally, it was coined by author John Koenig in his 2012 book, The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, a book that aimed to create new words for complex emotions that had not already been labeled. And his invention of this word came at a very relevant time in our culture. This unique form of nostalgia has become something that is all too common to see across the real world, but more heavily in the digital realm. Anemoia could be as simple as a 1950s themed diner, that feeling of time traveling into a very different era. The same can be said for a retro arcade or a 90s mall culture. When we look at the digital spectrum of anemoia, it becomes even more widespread. VHS edits, Polaroid and film cameras, vaporwave, liminal spaces, nostalgia edits, and even analog horror can all be forms of anemoia. Now let's make some distinctions here. Of course, there are always people who did experience things like using VHS or maybe the tail end of mall culture, but there's also a substantial amount of people who never did, and only know it through these mediums. Anemoia even extends beyond just places or internet trends. It can be experienced through modern subcultures. I think an easy to understand, very contemporary version of anemoia can be seen with the resurgence of 2000s nu metal culture. When it was created, nu metal was a musical movement from the early 2000s that had a very distinct fashion sense associated with it. This edgy, goth emo, dark clothes, colored hair, piercings, and very notably, extremely baggy clothes like the Jinko jean. While it hasn't resurged in the exact same form, the aesthetic of nu metal has become weirdly trendy for people who were far too young to have ever experienced the movement during its peak occurrence. I mean, speaking from personal experience, I live sort of near a high school and I see teenagers wearing Jinko jeans with Slipknot shirts a lot. And I know for a fact these kids were far too young to ever experience that wave of culture. When I was younger, 90s clothing had become extremely popular, and along with that, a small resurgence of grunge. Just like how the young ones today never experienced nu metal, no one my age was alive or conscious enough to have been a part of grunge. But the aesthetic and attitude were things that appealed to a decent amount of them, and they had access to it through prior decades of media. So this all begs the question, why does this occur? And what about our modern era is making it occur on the scale that it does? The biggest culprit for the cause of anemoia is most certainly media. And in an era where media has never been so accessible to both consume and create, it's no shock it would occur now. People have access to home videos and photos on a scale that's never ever occurred, which results in a lot of people creating these nostalgia edits. Now, where there are those who lived through the periods being depicted in these edits, there are many others who have not, and the aesthetics of the actual imagery and nostalgia media itself creates a feeling of secondhand nostalgia for the viewer. At its core, nostalgia emanates from personal experiences and memories, but nostalgic media still implants the idea of these borrowed memories into the individual who may have not experienced it directly. They've seen the same lifestyle, fashion, places, and everything else to a point where it may not be an experience they directly had, but it's an experience they've now internalized through this secondhand form of cultural memory. The issue with inheriting a cultural memory versus developing your own personal memory of a past era is romanticization. When someone is making a nostalgic edit of a past era or subculture, a lot of aspects of that time are left out. Nostalgia itself is a bittersweet emotion. The bitterness of it is that what you're nostalgic for isn't accessible to you anymore. The rest of the emotion is rooted in fondness and a sense of longing for that past. So when somebody is making nostalgic content, they will generally only put in positive aspects of what they were nostalgic about and leave out everything else. So when this form of cultural memory is internalized by an individual who never personally experienced it, The result is a perspective of the era that has been heavily romanticized and is often not an accurate representation of that depicted era. To go back to a prior example, it would be literally impossible for a 17-year-old today to be truly nostalgic for the nu metal era. They never could have experienced it. But what they can experience are nostalgic edits and pictures of people at, say, Ozfest 2001 seeing Limp Bizkit or Papa Roach live. They can experience pictures of the fashion from that era, images of the community, and when they become nostalgic for it, they're not nostalgic for the past itself, rather they are nostalgic for the idea of this past. But what compels someone to start emulating an era that they never experienced? Why does this feeling of anemoia grasp people so strongly, especially today? Well, as explained prior, anemoia's rise today can be tied to media accessibility and the internet as a whole. But this factor alone doesn't explain everything we need to know about the phenomena. Longing for a romanticized version of the past isn't just about aesthetics and secondhand nostalgia. It isn't just about longing for past eras one never experienced. Anemoia is misplaced identity, finding a new identity that feels more meaningful than what one already experiences in events that have already passed. Modern identity as we know it is inherently fragmented. In our world, there exist two versions of the individual. There is the physical and the digital. Social media has largely changed the way younger generations think, as this is all they've ever known. They are no longer just an individual, but many view their lives as a personal brand, so to say. What is your curated aesthetic? How many followers do you have? What makes you different? To many, this creates an element of social disconnect. As the real-life identity blends into the digital, a nonstop cycle of performative existence ensues. And from this feeling of social disconnect, a lack of belonging inevitably begins to set in. When viewing the romanticized nostalgic media of past eras, these same individuals see stable identities in stable social circles with cultural norms. They see an illusion of a coherent identity and a sense of belonging within an era that no longer exists. This is what causes the individual to embrace anemoia and emulate an era or culture that they never experienced. Through past media, the individual is able to self-project different versions of who they could have been. Maybe they were a 1980s teen who liked going to arcades and riding bikes around the neighborhood. Maybe they longed to have been a teen during Y2K with simpler tech, MySpace, in a time where the internet was much less omnipresent in our lives.
Or maybe they wish they could have gone to Ozfest in 2001 and seen Limp Bizkit.
Each era represents a version of who they could have been, how their social life would have been different, what their personality would have been like, and how their identity could have formed in a different time, in a different era. Anemoia doesn't necessarily have to occur for specific subcultures either. A popular form of nostalgia media is tied to regions and stages of growing up. Nostalgia videos like POV You Grew Up in the Midwest in the 2000s, showing people's homes, neighborhoods, and communities, gained millions of views. Christmas in the 2000s videos are extremely seasonally popular, videos showing school life in the 2000s as well. All of these, of course, reach their target audience, but many others happen upon these videos. And these videos even sprout entire subgenres like the concept of the liminal space. This form of secondhand nostalgia doesn't revolve around a subculture. Often these edits are just pictures of locations alone without any people in them. With enough exposure, one who never lived in these times could begin to feel anemoia from pictures of locations alone. And this could be due to a perception of a simpler time, a time before the online world began to overtake our physical one. To many who have never experienced life in these times, they feel anemoia for the idea of a pre-internet world that just seemed more welcoming. Another way I view the phenomena of anemoia is an ironic rejection of modern culture by its youth. To me, it seems a lot of young people don't like popular culture of the modern era. A lot of people have sort of woken up to the cultural slop industrial complex. Everything is a remake, everything is hyper-curated, everything is divisive but sterile at the same time. To many, aspects of our modern culture feel inauthentic. Our cultural products have started to feel hollow. No one really asked for a new Avatar movie, but we still got one. The reason it was made was just simply to make a bunch of money. And much of our pop culture can be viewed through this lens. That most of our products of pop culture lack a feeling of passion behind them. Along with this, pop culture has become very homogenized and lacks a feeling of community. Everyone can watch TikTok, listen to the same music, and watch the same shows, but it still doesn't mean an inclusive community will arise from this. This is how anemoia comes into effect. Many younger individuals who see this choose to reject modern culture and end up embracing a cultural era of the past. Now, the era and subculture certainly varies from person to person, but the anemoia-driven desire to be a part of a community that is no longer present and one that they never knew is an act of rejection of modern culture. They see the cultural artifacts, aesthetics, and attitude of past eras as forms of authentic culture. The media they have access to had a feeling behind it that resonates with them. They see an era where they perceive culture to be real and a culture that they can feel an identity in. But the rejection doesn't have to be of just pop culture. It can be a rejection of culture as a whole. Seeing life before social media, before every event was a post, is often romanticized. Feeling anemoia for the pre-internet era has become something that is all too common with younger people today due to a desire to return to a more present world. I'd also like to clarify some aspects about anemoia. Much of what I've said in relation to it has been about anemoia and nostalgia's association with identity. While there are certainly many who see a past cultural era and embrace it as a personality, this isn't the only way anemoia can be expressed. Anemoia can also be a form of appreciation for past eras. I certainly feel a sense of anemoia about Halo LAN parties. I was never old enough to experience a group of friends all setting up TVs in the same room to play Halo together. I've only ever known online gaming. But that doesn't mean that I don't feel a sense of nostalgia when I see old videos of these events, even though I never had the opportunity to participate in one. And to be honest, I think anemoia manifests more commonly as a form of appreciation for past eras. I don't think a lot of the Jinko jean wearing nu metal kids desperately wish they could have been the same age in 2001. They probably just think that nu metal is cool. One of my best friends growing up had extreme anemoia for the 1970s skateboarding scene. He dressed like them and he would ride Tony Alva boards in empty pools. He certainly longed for that time, but he didn't make it his complete identity. He just rocked it because he thought the era was cool. But anemoia as a phenomenon does pose one question that I'm not sure how to answer. Would it be unique to only our time if generations of the past had access to secondhand nostalgia as well? To me, it does seem like our modern era is a perfect storm for this phenomenon to occur. The combination of how social media has altered identity, a hollow pop culture, and accessibility to vast amounts of media from prior decades certainly allows for anemoia to become a more common feeling. I don't think anemoia is a bad thing inherently. The fact it occurs on the volume it does speaks more to the state of modern culture than it does those who feel it. But there is a problem with living in nostalgia. Ultimately, all of these eras have passed, and while there will be niche communities who carry on the cultural legacy of the past, they'll never be the norm again. Embracing a personality rooted in nostalgia may provide a sense of belonging in the moment, but that sense will be fleeting. The act of rooting a personality in nostalgia will ultimately cause more harm than good in the long run. No matter how much you surround yourself with the media and the styles of the past, it will never return. And that sense of longing that is a part of anemoia and nostalgia will only grow. But what do you think? I'd love to hear what you feel anemoia for. Leave a comment. Winner from last video's fun fact competition, the new Robot Master, with his fun fact, I would have never guessed. If you're still here and you haven't already, consider liking and subscribing. Only 5% of my viewers are subscribed, so it would really help me out. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.